I had spent decades protecting my family farm, but one morning I discovered something that made absolutely no sense. The HOA had built a full-size runway straight through land that was never theirs to touch. I pulled out the original property survey and checked the boundaries twice. The runway wasn't just near my farm. It crossed directly through the land my family had legally owned for generations. Then I saw Victoria Hayes, the HOA president, standing beside the runway like she had just built a monument. She looked completely confident because she believed the HOA could control everything around my farm. I asked Victoria one simple question: "Who gave you permission to build this?" Her answer was even simpler, and it told me she had no idea who she was dealing with. Victoria claimed the runway was part of a community aviation project approved by the HOA board. She insisted everyone would benefit from it, as if a neighborhood vote could magically erase my property rights and federal aviation regulations. That night, Sarah and I spread every deed and survey across the farmhouse table. The records confirmed what I already knew. The runway had been built across privately owned agricultural land. Victoria had made one enormous mistake. She assumed I was just another farmer fighting an HOA, but my day job was something she had never bothered to investigate. For years, I had worked in aviation safety and regulation, eventually becoming an FAA regional director. I knew exactly what questions needed to be asked, and exactly which authorities had jurisdiction over that runway. The next morning, I arranged with the proper aviation authorities to review the project. The moment the inspection began, Victoria's confidence started disappearing. Then the county sheriff arrived, and suddenly everyone was watching everyone else. Victoria had called for help, expecting the authorities to back her up, but she had no idea the real investigation was only beginning. Victoria insisted the HOA had every right to build a runway and demanded that the sheriff remove everyone from the property. But Sheriff Reynolds calmly asked her one question: "Can you show me the deed that give the HOA ownership of this land?" Victoria had paperwork from the HOA, but none of it proved ownership of my farm. For the first time, the woman who had been ordering everyone around didn't have an answer. The official survey made the situation even clearer. The runway didn't simply touch my property. It crossed my land and had been constructed without the authorization required for such a project. Michael inspected everything from the runway markings to the surrounding safety areas. With every measurement, the list of problems seemed to grow longer. Daniel finally produced the construction paperwork, hoping it would settle everything. Instead, Michael found that the documents did not match the actual runway project that had been built. Victoria suddenly stopped talking about permits and started talking about power. She warned me that the HOA had influential residents and expensive lawyers, but I knew the law didn't care how wealthy they were. The dispute moved from a runway to a formal meeting with county officials and aviation representatives. For the first time, everyone had to look at the same maps, the same records, and the same facts. I pointed directly to the property boundary and explained exactly where the runway crossed onto my land. Then I reminded everyone that my position at the FAA gave me a professional responsibility to follow the rules, not a personal favor to anyone. Michael's report confirmed what the inspection had revealed. The runway could not legally continue operating under the conditions they had created. Victoria stared at the report in disbelief, realizing her community project was about to become an official enforcement matter. By the end of the meeting, the runway was no longer a neighborhood dispute. An official shutdown process had begun, and Victoria still had no idea that the person signing the final order would be me. The next morning, the final review landed on my desk. I wasn't there as a farmer anymore. I was there as the FAA official responsible for reviewing the aviation violations. I read the entire report one final time before signing the order. The decision wasn't personal, and it wasn't revenge. It was a professional determination based on the evidence. When I returned home, Sarah was waiting for me beside the old farm fence. I told her the official shutdown process had been approved, but the story wasn't over yet. The official closure notice was delivered to the site, and operations were immediately halted. For the first time, the runway that Victoria had proudly built was completely silent. Victoria confronted me, demanding to know why I had destroyed her community project. I simply reminded her that the runway had been stopped because of documented regulatory and property issues, not because of who I was. That's when Victoria finally understood the mistake she had made. She hadn't picked a fight with someone who simply knew the rules. She had built the entire project on land and regulations she never properly verified. The HOA tried to challenge the shutdown through formal channels, but every argument led back to the same evidence. The property records, inspection findings, and regulatory requirements were all part of the official record. Weeks later, the runway remained closed and no aircraft were allowed to use it. The land was finally quiet again, and my farm was once more being used for what it was meant to be. Victoria thought the HOA could build whatever it wanted because no one would challenge them. But the law had a way of catching up with people who believed rules were only for everyone else. In the end, the HOA didn't get the private airport they wanted, and the unauthorized runway was shut down to the proper legal and regulatory process. And if there's one lesson I learned, it's this. Before you build something on someone else's land, make absolutely sure you know who owns it and who has the authority to stop you. If you enjoyed this HOA story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below. Where are you watching from? Globe showing Americas.